want you to, just for a second, mentally go back to your childhood. Not the house, but the feeling of it. Think about your comfort zone.
Hmm.
Where you grew up, the language you spoke, the
Yeah.
rituals that just felt normal. That feeling of home, it's cozy, right? It gives you this bedrock sense of who you are. But, and here's the big kind of uncomfortable question for today. What happens when that rootedness, that thing that gives us stability, unintentionally becomes a wall?
It's a profound tension, isn't it? We spend our lives trying to build a foundation. We want to know where we come from. But the source material we're looking at today, well, it argues that if we're not careful, that foundation stops being a launching pad. It starts becoming a fortress. And the thing about a fortress is, once you pull up that drawbridge, you have no idea what's actually happening outside.
Which, let's be honest, can feel a little safer.
Well, it feels safer, absolutely. But the argument here is that that safety comes at a massive cost.
And that is exactly where we're going in today's deep dive. We're looking at a really fascinating reflection. It's titled God of Many Faces. It's a pretty dense piece of writing that pulls in some heavy hitters, specifically the Franciscan friar Richard Rohr. And it does some serious, almost surgical analysis of Genesis and the Gospel of John.
And just to set the stakes here, the mission of this text isn't what you might expect. Usually when we talk about diversity, it's, in a corporate HR context, maybe a political one.
Right, it's about compliance or demographic.
Exactly. But this document is arguing that diversity is actually a theological necessity.
That's a bold claim. It's not just saying, be nice to people who are different.
No, not at all. It's saying you actually cannot understand the divine unless you engage with people who are different. The core argument is that God is revealed through difference, not sameness. If you stick to the sameness, you're essentially looking at a low-resolution image of God.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the text starts with a premise that I think most of us, if we're honest, can relate to. It says, most of us grow up within a single, largely homogeneous culture. And honestly, that sounds kind of nice. Easy.
And the text explicitly says that's a good thing initially. We shouldn't demonize it. That shared context, it gives us language, rituals, a sense of belonging. I mean, imagine trying to explain the world to a child without any cultural framework. It'd be impossible.
Right. You need a baseline. You need gravity before you can learn to fly.
Exactly. The author calls it rootedness. It's the soil. But here's the pivot, and it's a sharp one. The text says, yet when we remain confined within familiar boundaries, we may unintentionally close ourselves off from the richness that other cultures, traditions, and experiences offer.
See, I get that in theory, but confined is such a strong word. If I just really like my hometown and my traditions, am I really confined? Or am I just content?
And that's the trick, isn't it? Comfort can masquerade as contentment while it's actually becoming isolation. The source describes this very specific psychological mechanism, a downward spiral that happens when we stay there too long. It's not just that we stay ignorant, it's that our brain actively starts to change how we view the other.
I traced this progression in my notes. I want to walk through it slowly because it felt a little too real. It starts with limitation.
Which is neutral. Limitation just means I don't know what I don't know. You grew up in town A, so you don't know the customs of town B. That's not a sin, it's just geography.
Right. But then limitation turns into distance.
This is where the physical reality sets in. Now you're not just unaware, you're removed. You don't have relationships with people in town B. They're theoretical to you.
And this is where the brain does that weird thing. Distance turns into suspicion. Why does that happen? Why can't we just be distant and, cool with it?
Because the human brain hates a vacuum. If I don't know you and I don't see you, I can't verify your motives. I can't see your humanity. So biologically, to keep me safe, my brain starts filling in the gaps with anxiety. Why do they do it that way? What are they planning?
Their way of life undermines mine.
That's the one. And that leads to the final step. Suspicion turns into fear.
And fear is the mind killer. Once you're afraid of those who are different, the wall is built. The text puts it so tragically. Misunderstood differences are perceived as threats rather than gifts.
Threats rather than gifts.
Yeah.
That hits hard. Because if I see you as a threat, I'm not listening to you. I'm defending myself against you.
Precisely. And if you're busy defending yourself, you are certainly not learning from them. You've locked yourself in the fortress.
So this brings us to the core theological counterargument. Because if you believe in God, specifically the God described in the Judeo-Christian tradition here, you have to ask, does God share my suspicion? Is God sitting in that fortress with me?
And the answer from this source is a hard no. This is where we get the title concept, God of Many Faces. The text argues God is not a God of one face, one culture, or one expression. And to back that up, they bring in Richard Rohr.
Okay, so let's give some context on Rohr. Why him?
So Richard Rohr is a Franciscan friar. And the Franciscan tradition is just fascinating because it's not about sitting in a high tower reading books. It's about finding God in the grit, in nature, and, specifically in the motions of society. Franciscans believe the entire world is a cathedral. So when Rohr talks about this, he's coming from a place of looking for the divine in the messy parts of life.
He has this quote in the text from his book, Everything Belongs. He says, "The fact that God has given us so many different faces and temperaments and emotions and histories shows us how God honors each unique journey and culture."
Honors. That word jumped out at me too.
It's reversed, isn't it? Usually we're told to honor God. Or maybe, if we're lucky, God tolerates our weird little cultural habits. But Rohr is saying God honors them.
It implies intentionality. It implies that your specific temperament, your cultural history, it's not an accident, it's not clutter that God wishes you just get rid of so you could be more holy. It's actually part of the design.
And then Rohr delivers the punchline. He says, God is not threatened by differences. It's we who are.
That's the crux of the problem. We project our own insecurity onto the divine. We think, well, I feel uncomfortable when I hear a language I don't understand, so God must prefer English.
Right.
Or, I like order, so God must hate this chaotic mix of cultures. But Rohr is saying, just look at creation. It's wildly, inefficiently diverse. If God wanted uniformity, God is a terrible manufacturer.
Right. The assembly line is completely broken if the goal was sameness.
Exactly. The diversity is a feature, not a bug. And the source argues that our fear of that diversity is actually a spiritual failing. It's a failure to see how big God actually is.
And to prove this isn't just some modern kumbaya wishful thinking, the text goes way back to the very beginning, Genesis 1:27. God created humankind in God's image. Now, I've heard that verse a million times. It's on coffee mugs.
It is. But we need to look at the historical context to see why this deep dive highlights it. In the ancient world, when Genesis was written, the idea of the image of God existed, but it was exclusive. The king was the image of God. The Pharaoh was the image of God. You, the peasant farming weed, you were just you were labor. So for this text to say humankind, everyone, male and female, is created in the image of God, that was a revolutionary political theological explosion. It democratized the divine reflection.
But the text here takes it a step further. It argues that because God is infinite, no single person can possibly hold that full image. It's a shared reflection.
Think of it like a mirror, a giant, perfect mirror. If you shatter that mirror into 8 billion pieces, each shard holds a reflection. But if you pick up just one tiny shard, just your own, you can't see the whole picture. You just see a fragment.
So to see the image of God, you literally have to assemble the pieces.
And that means you have to look at the pieces that don't look like yours. The text lists specific attributes to make this concrete, and I think we should actually take a minute to go through these, because otherwise it's all just abstract words.
Yeah, let's do that. The first one is compassion.
Now, anyone can be compassionate, but the text suggests that certain cultures or life experiences really amplify this. Like, think about a culture that deeply prioritizes care for the elderly, where multi-generational living is the norm. There's a depth of compassion, of suffering with someone that you learn there that you might not in a hyper-individualistic society.
Right. If I'm focused on my career, my house, my success, I might miss that face of God entirely. Okay, what about strength?
And not just physical strength. Think about the strength of conviction. The prophet speaking truth to power. If you only surround yourself with agreeable people who never challenge the status quo, you're missing the strength aspect of the divine. You're missing the God who flips tables.
That's a good point. We usually want the nice God. We don't want the strength God. What about tenderness?
This one is interesting. We often overlook the quiet people, the introverts, the gentle souls who aren't trying to dominate the room. But the text says that tenderness is a specific face of God. If you value boldness and charisma above all else, you are blind to God's tenderness.
Resilience. This one feels heavy.
It is. Resilience is best seen in those who have suffered. Marginalized communities who have survived centuries of oppression and yet kept their joy, kept their faith. You can't learn that kind of resilience from a textbook, and you certainly can't learn it if you've never faced real adversity.
So if I stay in my comfort zone, my fortress, I literally cannot understand God's resilience.
Exactly. You are blocking yourself off from that revelation.
And the last pair, wisdom and creativity.
The point is, No single individual can embody all of these at once at maximum capacity. I can't be perfectly tender and perfectly strong and perfectly resilient and creative all at the same time. I'm limited. I'm one shard of glass.
So if I only hang out with people who are exactly like me, let's say people who value logic and efficiency, then I'm basically looking at a stick figure drawing of God.
When you could be looking at a high-definition 3D masterpiece, yes. The synthesis here is that seeing God requires looking at all people, not just as a nice social project, but as a prerequisite for spiritual sight. If you reject a certain type of person, you are blinding yourself to a specific aspect of the divine.
But here's the pushback, and I think a lot of listeners might be feeling this. Diversity is hard. It's messy. It creates conflict. Wouldn't it be better if we were all the same? If we all spoke the same language and had the same values, we wouldn't fight so much.
You're arguing for uniformity. And you're right, uniformity is efficient, it is safe, it is also sterile.
It's sterile.
It's the difference between a parking lot and a rainforest. A parking lot is uniform, it's flat, it's concrete, it's predictable. Nothing grows there. A rainforest is chaotic, dangerous, colorful, and teeming with life. The text brings up the concept of unity, but it draws a hard line between unity and uniformity.
It references Jesus' prayer in John 17:21, that they may all be one, which has been used historically as a club to beat people into submission. Be one by being exactly like me.
Right. Submit to my culture, and then we'll be one.
But the text says that's not the goal at all. It defines unity as a communion that honors difference while holding all together in love.
Communion that honors difference.
Think about the human body. St. Paul uses this analogy and it fits perfectly. The eye is not the ear. The hand is not the foot. If the whole body were an eye, you'd be a giant rolling eyeball. You couldn't hear, you couldn't walk. You would be a monster.
That is a terrifying image.
But it's true. The body only works because the parts are different. They're unified by a common lifeblood, but their functions are totally distinct. The text argues that humanity is the same. We need the difference.
So when the source talks about reframing the divine and saying God has many faces, it's not saying there are 50 gods. No, it means the one God is so infinite that he cannot be fully expressed by one narrow slice of humanity. It recognizes the fullness of God revealed through human diversity.
I used the analogy earlier of the mirror, but let's talk music. You can't play a symphony on a kazoo.
I mean, you can try, but it's going to get annoying really fast.
You need the strings, the brass, the percussion. You need the deep bass and the high flute.
And here's the kicker. If you're the flute player, you might be terrified of the tuba. It's loud, it's big, it vibrates the floor, it's other.
Oh.
But without it, your music lacks foundation. You need the tuba to make the symphony.
Okay, let's bring this down to the ground level, because right now, looking at the world, we are pretty terrified of the tuba.
That is putting it mildly.
The text contrasts this divine invitation with the current state of the world. It says, in a world where fear and self-interest often exploit differences to divide, and man, does that ring true? It feels like every algorithm, every news cycle is designed to say, those people over there, they're the problem, they are the threat.
Fear is the most powerful motivator we have. It sells ads. It gets votes. It keeps us in our safe, homogeneous bubbles. It reinforces the fortress walls. But the text offers a gentle invitation to go the other way, to swim upstream.
And it describes a shift in perspective, a transformation. It talks about moving from suspicion to solidarity.
Think about that leap. Suspicion says, what do you want from me? Solidarity says, I am with you. Your well-being is tied to mine. That just destroys the distance we talked about earlier. It means walking out of the fortress and shaking hands.
And the second shift, moving from fear to reverence.
This is the ultimate truth of the document. It says, for God is indeed a God of many faces, and every face is intrinsically holy.
Reverence, that's a heavy word. We usually reserve that for, like, entering a cathedral or handling a sacred text or maybe meeting the Pope.
But the source is arguing that the human face, the face of the stranger, the face of the immigrant, the face of the person who voted differently than you, that face deserves the same reverence as a cathedral.
Because it's holding a piece of the reflection.
Exactly. If you treat that face with contempt, you are treating an aspect of God with contempt. That is the theological stakes here. It's not just about, can't we all get along?
Yeah.
It's about whether you are actually worshiping the Creator in all his fullness, or just worshiping a mirror image of yourself.
That is convicting,
Yeah.
honestly. Because it's easy to reverence God in a beautiful sunset. It's really hard to reverence God in a person who is annoying you.
It's the hardest thing in the world.
Yeah.
But that's the work.
Wow. Okay, let's recap this journey because we've covered a lot of ground. We started with the comfort of our homogeneous home base, which is good, it grounds us. But we saw the trap, the downward spiral from limitation to distance to suspicion and finally to
Yep.
fear.
And we countered that fear with the insight from Richard Rohr in Genesis.
Yeah.
That God creates diversity on purpose. That the divine image is a shared reflection, scattered across every culture and temperament. Compassion, strength, tenderness, resilience.
We looked at the difference between unity and uniformity. Unity isn't the parking lot, it's the rainforest. It's the body working together. And finally, that call to move from fear to reverence, to see the God of many faces in the people all around us.
It's a shift from seeing difference as a threat to seeing difference as a revelation.
So here's where we leave you today. We always like to give you something to chew on, something to take out of your earbuds and into your actual life.
We talked about those attributes.
Yeah.
And we talked about the missing shards of glass.
Here is my question for you. Who is the person in your life, or maybe the group of people in your world, that you instinctively avoid? Be honest. Maybe they intimidate you. Maybe they confuse you. Maybe they just irritate you because they don't follow your rules of how life should be lived.
Ask yourself, if that person is carrying a unique shard of the divine reflection, what specific aspect of God are you missing out on by building a wall against them?
Are you missing out on God's unexpected patience, God's fierce challenge, God's wild creativity?
You won't find it in the mirror. You only find it in them.
Something to think about the next time you feel that wall going up. Thanks for diving in with us.
See you next time.